Okay. So I won't give you all the details on this, but, oh, I had a transition. I'm going to skip the transition and just talk about the effect of teacher turnover on student achievement. You know, the transition is that one of the clear effects of principals is being able to retain their best teachers. That we see this in a lot of our studies. We see when teachers leave, we've done surveys, and the main reason in the US that young teachers leave school is because of dissatisfaction with their administration. And that's a really easy thing to say, but there have been kind of more careful studies that try to kind of sort out the different working conditions in the school, and that's the one that really kicks in. So anyway, that's the link with teacher turnover, but really this is just a different paper. So there's a whole bunch of leaving of schools. Nationally, about 30% of teachers leave the profession after 5 years, but there's a lot more turnover year to year across schools. So in average in New York City, where I'm going to do this next study, that's the biggest district. There are about 1 million kids. About 20% of teachers leave their school each year, so a fifth of the workforce. And it's often assumed that teacher turnover harms students, but there's really kind of surprisingly been no evidence. I went to try to find evidence on it for something else I was doing and saw there wasn't. And so this is an attempt to try to get evidence on it. It's clear that students learn less in schools with lots of turnover, but those could just be kind of bad schools, and that's why the teachers are leaving, and that's why the students aren't doing well, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a causal effect. So I again wanted to start, you know how we started with the student achievement as a function of their background and then the school. I wanted to think similarly about turnover. And so my kind of view going into it, this is joint work with Matt Ronfeld and Jim Wyckoff, who are two of my colleagues. My view was that a learning of a student is some function, again, of their characteristics and the quality of instruction or the quality of the school that they're in. And the quality of the instruction they receive has to do with the characteristics of the other kids in the class. It has to do with who the teacher is. And it has to do with these kind of school supports that are out there that help the teacher do better, that provide supports for students so they can pay attention when they're in class and know other things are taken care of. So there are these kind of three things: who the student or who their peers are, who their teacher is, and these contexts and supports. And when I think of teacher turnover, I think it affects two of those. One of the things it clearly affects is which teacher you have. Okay? So if teachers turn over, you're going to have a different teacher than you would have otherwise. And I'm going to call that the compositional effect of turnover. It changes the composition. In addition, turnover could affect these other things going on in the school that support learning in the classroom. And I'm going to call that either the disruption or the innovation effect. So you lose a teacher for turnover, and either what happens is you suddenly lost all this knowledge that was really important. Right? You've lost something good, and it disrupts what's going on. The new teacher comes in, and they need extra supports. The teachers who are there need to spend time with them. You've lost some skills, so there's this disruption. Of course, it also could be innovation. You could lose somebody, and you could get someone in who has new ideas that really help with everything. We don't really know which direction that goes, but there should be something in addition to just who changes that happens when there's turnover. And that's what I'm going to try to do in this study, or what we tried to do, was to look to see if there's an average effect of teacher turnover, and then try to see whether that average effect was driven by the compositional effect or by this disruption innovation effect. And that's really kind of simply what the paper's about. Okay, let me skip all of this. So the way that I'm going to do this, the worry generally in looking at the effect of teacher turnover is that something kind of bad happens and teachers leave, or it's just kind of a bad place to be and teachers leave. And so it's really hard to look at a school and relate, for example, let's say how much teacher turnover there is to how much kids learn, because there could be this other factor that affects both. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, just in elementary schools, and look at grade level teams of teachers. And I'm not sure if it works this way here, but in the US there's lots of kind of grade level work that goes on, where teachers coordinate with each other at the grade level around the curriculum. They're all teaching students all the subjects, essentially, and they work together. And so I'm going to think of turnover of those teams. So I'm going to look at the 4th grade, for example, within a given school, and the 5th grade within the given school, and the turnover there, and how the turnover, let's say, in the 4th grade in an elementary school affects how much kids learn the next year when there's new teachers and things like that. And the benefit of this approach is then I can compare the 4th grade, the turnover of teachers in the 4th grade, to the turnover of teachers in the 5th grade in that same school. And that way, if there's some kind of negative shock to the school, because I'm comparing the 4th to the 5th grade, that should happen to both of them. So I don't have to worry about that as much. And I can just compare 4th to 4th grade. I can see, do 4th graders learn less in the year of turnover relative to 5th graders? And I've taken out a lot of the problems. I didn't explain that very well, but let me see if I can do this better. So I'm going to look at turnover in the 5th grade and turnover in the 4th grade in the same elementary school. I'm going to do this for all elementary schools in the city. And it's really going to be based on 2 comparisons. One is the 4th to the 5th grade in the same school, and one is the same school, but the 4th grade in one year to the 4th grade in the next year, 5th grade in one year to the 5th grade in the next year. And in doing that, I can take out lots of different kinds of shocks. For example, if the principal turns over, one, we think something bad happens and the principal leaves, then we would see it in the year before the turnover, not in actually the year after. So that's okay. But on top of that, because I'm comparing 4th to 5th grade, and we think it should pretty much affect those 2 things equally, if suddenly both grades go down, I'm not going to be picking that up. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So I guess the one other thing is that it's not as easy as one might think to figure out how to measure turnover, because so let's say I want turnover to be taking a group of teachers in one year and seeing what proportion of them are still around in the next year. That's one measure of turnover. But an equally kind of good measure of turnover for the kinds of issues we're talking about is to see a group of teachers in one year and say, how many of you were there last year? And it's going to be different because if the grade grows or something, you might not have lost anybody, but you might have gained somebody, and gaining somebody might cause disruption too. So I'm going to look at both of these kinds of measures. So on average, or overall, I'm just going to tell you essentially what the results are, which is, on average, teacher turnover has a negative effect on students. And I think it's fair, the causal effect is kind of pretty well estimated there. Then once I find a negative effect of turnover, what I want to ask is, I guess I should tell you the size. So the size of the turnover, if you compare, how would I say this? Well, going from 0 to 100% turnover is a lot of turnover, but there the effect is really quite big. It's, bigger than the difference between having a new teacher and having a teacher with experience. If you just compare kind of places that don't have turnover to the kind of top quartile of turnover, it's about 0.03, which in my kind of mind is similar to the let's say, similar to the difference between a 2nd and 3rd year teacher teaching. It's a decent size effect, particularly because it goes to every kid in the school. Okay, so that's the first part. And then the second part of the second part of the paper, we just see if it's different in different types of schools. And in general, the effect is slightly bigger in schools that serve higher proportion of non-white students and a higher proportion of low-achieving students. It's there in both kinds of schools, but it's more there in these lower-performing schools. Okay. But the more interesting part, I think, is trying to separate out the composition from the disruption. And we do it a number of different ways. One is just controlling for the characteristics of the teachers and seeing how much of it we can get rid of. And changes in teacher experience, and just that negative of being a new teacher in a school in the first year, this kind of transitional stuff, explains a good chunk of it, but not all of it. And you can tell one way of looking at that it doesn't explain all of it is that I could not look at any of the kids who had new teachers. So I'm only going to look at kids who had teachers who were teaching in the 4th grade this year and teaching in the 4th grade the next year. So they didn't change the teacher. Still, those kids do worse in years when there's been higher transition. So we find some evidence that there's not only this kind of compositional effect, which has negative effects because there's some change in experience, but you get this kind of it's hard to adjust year. But also that affects not only the kids with those teachers, but the kids who have teachers who probably have to spend their time helping the new teachers adjust. Okay, so that's a very quick summary of that paper, but for us it was a really interesting thing to see. We were kind of surprised to see it. I'm happy to answer questions on that one too.